Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning on this very interesting topic that's always top of mind for everybody. I'm Kim Spurgeon, and I run our career transition and career development business for Canada. And I'm glad to kick us off this morning to begin the wonderful conversation and hear from these esteemed experts on AI and how they're applying it, whether it's leadership, hiring, design of their workforce. So really excited to hear everybody's point of view on that. Before we hear from them though, one of the things I thought I'd share with you, and before I introduce Tim Hewitt, will be moderating the panel, is a little bit about some of our research. So our parent company, Adecco, does global research every year. It's called the Global Workforce of the Future. This year it was focused on how to thrive in the era of AI. And some of the interesting stats, which hopefully the esteemed panelists will give us some feedback on some of the research. Over 37,000 people were surveyed in 31 countries, so very broad spectrum of people that were surveyed at senior levels. And some of the interesting findings, I'm just going to share 3 or 4 little tidbits and see how this applies to everybody on the panel in terms of their point of view. 77% say AI enables them to perform tasks they never could perform before, so that's an interesting stat. Uncertainty still remains though. 76% anticipate AI will create jobs. 70% expect their jobs to be redesigned, and only 23% fear that their jobs will be lost. So that's an interesting stat. If anybody follows the Economic Forum of World of Work, their stats are a little bit different on that concern for job loss, so that's interesting to see how that'll play out. Still continue concerns around privacy and data misuse concerns. When they did the survey in 2024, the survey stats said 17% were concerned. This year, at the beginning of the year, when they did the survey, 44% are much more concerned about privacy and data. So that's definitely concerned, and we experience it from organizations really wanting to understand how we're using AI, so we know that concern level has definitely gone up a significant amount. 63% of hiring leaders state it's more challenging to find candidates that actually have adequate AI skills, so the whole concept of do people have adequate skills in AI to do their jobs? So that'll definitely be a topic, I'm sure, for the folks on the panel today. So just a few little tidbits of our survey results. Whoever invited you will have a chance to send you some of the survey data for you so you can take a look at it in full detail. And I'm going to turn this over to Tim Hewitt. He leads our executive search practice for North America, wherever Tim is. There he is. So Tim's going to moderate the panel today and introduce our panelists. Over to you, Tim.
I was going to leave you up here and let you figure out all this AI fun. So anyways, that's great. So listen, I'm really excited to be here. This is such an interesting topic for all of us. Let me just see. I think you can hear me. Probably lucky if you can't. We have 5, as Kim said, great panelists here. We've done something very different, a little bit intentional on this, which is to mix people who are in HR leadership roles and people who have deep expertise from a business point of view in AI to kind of really get the conversation going and make it sort of much more useful as we get into it. I think this is just such an interesting period to be working, and when you think about how much we use this in our personal lives. In fact, when I think about how we use it as an organization, part of our training, for lack of a better word, was to make sure that people could use the tools themselves and really played with them themselves. And that actually tended to spill over a lot into their use of it professionally. So that worked really well. I think one of the other pieces that strikes me most is when you think about unique things that people can do that AI cannot do. And there are a couple of them that come to mind, things like empathy, things like intuition. And I think one of my favorites is relationships. And as I was thinking about talking about this the other day, I thought, in fact, I was listening to the news on the way home, and it was about some younger folks who had built relationships with these AI chatbots. And I thought, that wasn't really what I meant when I was thinking about relationships, right? I meant real relationships, like the ones in this room. So, look, what I'd like to do is introduce the panelists, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. So we'll start with Britta.
Well, thank you very much, Tim, for that introduction, and good morning, everyone. It's great to see so many of you here. My name is Britta, and I am the Group Senior Vice President of HR at the Adecco Group for the Americas. So I have responsibility for South America through to Canada, where I am based, proud to be based. The Adecco Group, many of you may not realize this, but the Adecco Group is actually the parent company of LHH. So the Adecco Group has three primary operating companies: Acodis, which operates mostly in the tech and engineering space; LHH, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with; and then the Adecco Group itself. So we are a global leader in talent, staffing, and leadership development. I have been with the Adecco Group for under a year. My career prior to Adecco was actually primarily in healthcare and industrial. So I spent 22 years at 3M as an executive over our global businesses in healthcare and consumer packaged goods. And most recently, prior to Adecco, I was the president and managing director of Philips Canada, so operated in the health technology space locally here. And then I was the head of HR also for North America at Philips for 5 years. So that's a little bit about me. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Britta. Roman.
Good morning, everyone. I feel outnumbered in the room. Being seen, I think I'm the only tech background person in the room, maybe. My name is Roman Coba. I'm the interim CTO for WSIB. And if you don't know what WSIB, it's the Workplace Safety and Insurance Bureau. Or some of you know the old name used to be called Workers' Comp as a short name. I have a lot of years of experience in the IT industry leading progressive global and national companies, mostly transformational journeys. But I don't think anybody in the industry has seen a transformation that's coming like now. Yeah. I think the time's right for AI to take the right course in business, but it should take a very careful course. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through today.
Great. Margot.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Margot Lackenbauer, and I'm the Chief HR Officer at BDO Canada. For those of you who may not know BDO, we are one of Canada's leading professional services firms. I've spent my over 20-year career in HR, having worked in various industries: professional services, hospitality, consumer packaged goods. And like you, I am really fascinated by this topic. It's one that I think about every day, and one that there's no playbook for. So great to be part of a conversation like this morning, and I'm looking forward to learning from my fellow panelists. So thank you.
Thanks, Margot. Brice.
Thanks, everyone. Really great. I also feel a little outnumbered from my normal day-to-day, but it's great to be here with kind of this functional representation. My name's Brice Scheschuk. Tim's a personal friend. I've known him for a while. I grew up in entrepreneur land. My business partners and I have a company called Globalive Capital, and we are most known in Canada as the founders of the scale-up Win Mobile, now known as Freedom Mobile, a challenger that took on the telecom oligopoly over about a 10-year period. I actually I went up the finance route, CFO and related, but I had HR at Win from 2011 to 2014, one of the most rewarding periods of my career to add that into my portfolio. We exited all operating businesses in 2016. We built an investment company with our own capital at that point with a major focus on tech, venture, and innovation. We thought that Canada had a lot of interesting things going on in the mid-2010s around those themes. And so we've been investors for about a decade. And we decided to make a change this year. And because we hadn't had enough pain in our lives, we decided through a lot of interesting maneuvers to buy a Schedule I bank. The smallest one in Canada is called Wealth One. We closed that in the summer, and so we've decided to take on another regulated oligopolistic industry and see if we can do some challenge. And partly why I'm here is we saw an opportunity in the mid-market, which was completely neglected from an advisory standpoint as it relates to AI. And so when we see an opportunity, we often found things. And we started an AI advisory called Zero Stone that I spent some time on. And maybe lastly, I'll say that we got also, myself and a bunch of scaled entrepreneurs got very, very interested in public policy over the last few years. And we felt that Canada had moved off of a growth agenda. And so about a year ago now, we formed an organization, a not-for-profit called Build Canada. Not sure if anyone has heard of this in the room. I wrote the telecom memo, one of the most cathartic things I've done in the last decade. We have a sequence of policy moves that we are making, interfacing to the political structure at all levels and trying to move the needle on a growth agenda for our country. super happy to be here.
That's great. Thanks, Brice. Diana.
Okay, well, hello everyone. Good morning. So happy to be here. Thanks so much for organizing this. My name is Diana Valler. I'm Chief Human Resources Officer for TravelBrands and a group of companies. You might know about redtech.ca, hopefully. I probably know about Expedia or competitors, and I've been with this organization for the past 6 years and a half, the moment when we had been purchased by HS Japan. So we are Japan onboarding. They do have around 17,000 employees worldwide, including us. And a bit about my career, I started in franchising industry, then moved to technology, then we did AI, funny enough, like the topic of today. And then we concluded, of course, within the beautiful of travel industry. So very, very happy to be here. Looking forward to be learning a lot. Hearing about your backgrounds, I'm like, wow, cannot wait to learn a lot. I'm sure we can learn from the audience as well. And looking forward to be discussing this amazing topic about AI. Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks, Diana.
Thank you.
So you can now tell, after you've heard what they all do, we're never going to get through this in an hour. So I hope you're comfortable. Might want to text people, tell them you're not going to make that meeting. So let me start with you, Britta. And I want to talk to you about the biggest opportunity that you had been involved in and how it had impacted the business from your perspective so far.
That's a big question. I guess from my perspective, makes it a little bit easier to unpack. So in my day-to-day role, I see examples all over the place, all over our organization of people individually embracing AI to change how they spend their time and fundamentally accomplish their work. And this is the fun part of the AI. It's how we all each individually play with it, experiment, and unleash this potential of more time. We can completely redefine, I think, the space-time continuum with these tools, and very simple, basic stuff. And when I think about how I see how we as an organization see the opportunity that AI presents us, sort of bucketize it in three areas. One is that individual ability to change up the way we all spend our time. So unleash that human potential of spending time on the work that's impactful, that we all truly enjoy, that we all really want to get to, but we can't get to in an average day because of all these mundane tasks that AI can help us with, whether it's scheduling, research. I mean, I just think of so many ways, things that used to take up hours of mine or my team's time that we can now free up using AI tools. The second part, which I think is more transformative and more exciting, is how do we then take AI and use it to fundamentally transform our ways of working, our processes, disrupting our own business, if you will. If you think about it, we're in the talent management space, and it's ripe for innovation and disruption with AI, just as I would argue all industries are. Can we get there first? So I see opportunity, and as an organization, we're trying to get there first. We have some really cool partnerships with Salesforce and other organizations to look at how we can be first to disrupt our own industry with AI and fundamentally embed AI in our work processes. And I think the third bucket is then where I see opportunities. Well, then how do we also take that same innovative thinking and bring it to our clients and our customers? So how can we help our clients, first of all, build AI skills for themselves within their own organizations, and then also help them disrupt their ways of working to be more productive? So I think about the opportunity for AI along those three spaces, where I see potential problematic usage of AI is when we don't have strategy around those. So organizations that are deploying AI or not systematically deploying AI by thinking about policy, governance, transparency, the ethics around AI, unlawful activity, that's where there's, I think, a lot of opportunity for unhealthy use of AI, and particularly organizations who aren't investing in upskilling or skilling their own organizations. I had a great conversation, I have to say, coming into this session about governance around AI. I know our audience has a lot of interesting things to share on this topic. But also, I think it's really important investing in the upskilling, because if you don't, as an organization, invest in teaching AI, you risk lack of trust and misuse. And that's where I think the ROI of AI can get lost. So those are some initial thoughts.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Britta. So I think that gives us a really good overview, high-level perspective. I wanted to ask Brice about something he and I chatted about a month or so ago, and it was a bit of a massive innovation in industry years ago, and that's the advent of electricity. So Brice, could you comment on that? I think that's such good foundation. This has nothing to do with age. If it was, he would flip it back on me in a heartbeat, and I would deserve it.
I was not around when electricity was.
I was.
Although I love longevity as a topic, I was
Yes.
not around then.
Yes, exactly.
How many people in the room have heard of Creative Destruction Lab? Oh, good number of hands. I love it. Creative Destruction Lab is an organization formed out of Rotman that has become a global export for helping founders of massively scalable opportunities build companies. I'm a mentor there. There's a sister organization called Next Canada, which does something similar for student. I see hands for Next as well. Love it. Stay close to the entrepreneurs, particularly now. Next had its 15th year anniversary dinner recently, and I went as an attendee, and one of the speakers was a founder of Creative Destruction Lab, a well-known Canadian who I think just got the Order of Canada in the last few years, named Ajay Agarwal. Ajay was speaking, and he gave a foundational set of remarks around the paradigm shift of electricity and how to parallel that to AI. And so I'll spend 2 minutes recounting it. I think really macro, what it is talking about is the clarion call. I think we're all getting the religion that's coming at us, but here's some interesting data. You go back to just before electricity was invented, power was driven by water and steam, and everything was built on the centralization in a factory or in a mill or whatever because of the nature of how that power was generated. Electricity is invented, and very quickly the entrepreneurs figure out that you can distribute power and you can distribute machinery therein. And you would think with what we know now that that would be very quickly adopted, that entrepreneurs would be, exploding all over to make changes to their factories and so on. It turns out that that classic set of human responses, which you see a little bit of now, happened, and it required new blood, new thinking, new innovation, new entrepreneurs, a bit of a reset to capital. Many of the themes we're hearing now, 90% of companies that were old school legacy failed for many reasons, but a lot of them tie back to the add of electrical power to a manufacturing facility and then the changes that wrought in so many other ways. Actually, I heard an interesting one. The textile industry in Massachusetts, which was a very big thing, powered primarily by water, when electricity came, because of labor costs in the South, not a positive story, and the ability to put electricity anywhere, changed the entire economics of textiles. And those who evolved and adapted won. And so the point to that story is, when I heard the 90% from Ajay, I didn't validate it, but it was shocking to me, okay? Now, if I then try to relate a little bit of that to the modern situation, I think if we look around, a lot of things are happening that you expect in a transition like this. Toby Lutke, CEO of Canada's most interesting and exciting company, Shopify, most valuable company in Canada, famously, you gotta follow that guy. He put an AI memo out a little while ago that a lot of people talk about, where every position has to first be viewed to see if AI can do its job. Okay, that's interesting, particularly interesting for people in this room. Okay, an MIT study came out a month or two ago that has gotten tons of press, almost like people wanted it to come out, because they say 90% of AI projects are not adding positive ROI, okay? For those who live in my world of venture and startup, the agentic world, which is the game changer, is changing every 90 days foundationally. So the message I would leave you with on the paradigm shift is that there is no head in the sand. There is no ducking this trend. There is no hoping that it fails and so on. This is, everyone needs to be educated on this. Everyone needs to go deep and embrace this. It is part of all hiring that we're starting to see in the best companies. Are you a vibe coder? Do you even understand what that means in any position in a company, and so on? And the clarion call is, don't be one of those 90% companies on the paradigm shift.
Yeah, it's such an important lesson. And I just thought that would be good to hear, good to sort of set the foundation for the rest of what we're going to talk about. So I wanted to ask you, Diana, when you think of the greatest areas of resistance in your organization, how do you think about that, and how do you help them overcome that? It's exactly on the heels of what Brice just spoke
Brice
about,
was
of course.
saying. Of course, you're right. I mean, let's start there. People, I don't think they are afraid of AI per se, but they're afraid that AI might steal their jobs, that they might not have the right skills, that they might not have the right processes, and also how do they embrace the change management with AI. So truly what we have seen within our organization, we saw it in 3 buckets. The first one is the skills capabilities. They are like, do I know how to basically use AI or work with AI, right? Do I have the right skills? How do I do it? How do I go about it? So truly our solution has been, let's try to shift the paradigm. And funny what you're saying as well, I was just like coming from an UKG Executive Summit, and I had the honor to meet Jeremy Utley, as you probably know, is a Stanford professor directly on AI. And he was telling to all of us, we have to shift the paradigm. Rather than just like saying, I use AI, you have to start thinking, I work with AI. Because to your point, we are in a agentic era, the way we are, and we have to literally understand the changes here. And what we did, we saw a shift in the people's mentalities when we said that. You start working with AI. AI is going to be supporting, enhancing your skills, not losing your skill set, not replacing your skill set. So we did that from the shift paradigm, of course, within the skill set. The second bucket was really on the process workflows. Because ultimately, as you know, people are like, oh my God, AI is doing better than me. What happens to me? What happens if, right, the AI is doing it faster and better? Is again, telling them, let's co-design and co-create the projects together. And you're going to be seeing how the people mindset is going to be changing. And we say, yes, we have to work with AI. Yes, we have to have certain policies in place. And as you remember, I just shared about Japan. So as you can imagine, we do have a mixed culture, making sure from our mother company we follow the governance. And we're also doing it within Canada. But if you do have the right policy and the right information, and we work with the people, and you co-design the processes together, it's going to be much better. And the third one I'm going to touch upon, speaking about resistance, was really resistance to change. I mean, you heard we are in travel, so that's our product. As I'm sure you know, during COVID and post-COVID, we are still doing restructuring. Unfortunately, we had to restructure last month and other individuals as well, given the industry we are in. So the people are already, having that change fatigue, if you will, changing in restructuring, changing in mindset, changing in the organization per se, changing within our industry. So change again with AI, how can you do it? So it's all about positioning, and what we did intentionally, we have done a session all together for all our staff. And to your point, we started with the leaders. So we started executive, then directors, then managers, and then for all the staff, and truly telling them, what is AI from our perspective? AI is here, and how can you best use it? We launched our HR policies, but we also launched some tools to make sure that people are using it. So not only within our call center, which is already having bots to answer questions, but within every single department. And by doing that intentionally, I can tell you they're embracing it. They are starting seeing it as a potential partner, and that resistance to change, resistance to adopting it, if you will, is starting to be minimized. And the organization is starting embracing it. But you have to be intentional and communicate, overly communicate, use it, and of course, leading also by examples, because our teams, I'm sure, similar to yours, they look up to us. I can preach about AI, but if I don't use it myself, right, then of course that wouldn't look very good. So I think it's just, having that resistance, but overcoming it and doing what is best for your organization within your own companies.
Yeah, it's such a good point. The sharing of examples, the what's worked. I think that's been the most compelling thing for our organization. We literally will get together every 2 weeks and talk about what's happening, what have you done that's worked, and what hasn't, and who can help you, right? And someone always goes, I can take care of that, and they're off and running. So, Margot, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some tools that you've invested in that you think are particularly effective, and maybe an example or two of how that's played out.
Sure. We are absolutely investing in AI, and I think to build on what Brice and Diana were just talking about, we know that the tools are important, but tools don't change organizations, people do. And so we are investing in tools, but we are also investing very much in bringing our people along the journey and helping to develop those skills. So probably most in this room are familiar with the term FOMO, fear of missing out. Has anyone heard the term FOBO? That is a term that I'm starting to hear increasingly, and it's the fear of becoming obsolete. And so we know that that's a real concern. And so investing in training programs, giving our people the experiential opportunities to have that hands-on experience and really test the tools, understand how they work, what tools work best for which applications. In our environment, we are a professional services firm, so we have different, what we call lines of service. You may call them business units, but they all have their unique challenges. And so we have, I'm sure like many of you in the room, deployed company-wide tools such as Copilot, which is in the hands of all of our people. We are also rolling out ChatGPT Enterprise, but we are also building GPTs and in the early stages of our journey of doing a lot of work to build agents that are tackling specific business challenges within our various business units. And so really looking to our people to, equip them with the skills and the knowledge so that they can take that and go and develop the tools that can really drive value both for ourselves and, as you were talking about, thinking from the lens of how do we help our clients. So we talk about ourselves as customer zero, and really looking at how do we leverage AI to transform the way that we work internally so that we can take those learnings and help our clients do the same.
Exactly. That's great.
A couple of, just a specific example maybe that's top of mind for me with my HR hat on in terms of how we're leveraging tools. So we're using them for, common tasks such as analyzing large amounts of data, drafting reports, summarizing complex regulations that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. One that's top of mind for me right now is we just closed our engagement survey, which some of you may run. And so when I think about back in the day when we used to spend weeks combing through that data, reading thousands of employee comments that came in, and now to leverage AI to analyze that data, to do that sentiment analysis, it's not only helping us do the work faster, but it's actually allowing us to get much better insights from that data and then helping us determine where our areas of focus should be, where are the greatest areas of opportunity as we think about our action plans for next year. So it's delivering a ton of value, not just on the productivity side, but in terms of the value creation.
Yeah, that's great. It's a great example because that's just a monumental amount of work getting through it, like many of those examples are. Britta, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the tools that you think are getting used most effectively, and from that maybe more specifically from a return on investment point of view.
Yeah, I mean, Margot's shared some great examples that really resonate with me in terms of how we're using it internally in our organization as well. When I think about, how AI is being used and if it's being used effectively, I always think about it in terms of adoption and capability building. So when I think about adoption within our organization, we've got great uptick in adoption. Once you introduce tools, people love using them. I mean, our recruiters, for example, which is a big part of our business, we have a lot of success using generative AI to help with building job profiles, something as specific as building a creative job profile for postings, for building customized interview questions, for then building candidate profiles. I mean, we have a lot of evidence of adoption in those spaces that we can measure that it's actually in the countries and places where we're using it, saving between 30 and 60% of a recruiter's time. That's transformative. If you can free up 60% of a recruiter's time, that's transforming your business model. So we have great evidence of adoption. I would say, our challenge there is I reference specific countries, specific business units. Like, how do we scale this faster? Because I do have FOBO. When I hear myself say that pace of, and many of you probably work for large corporate organizations where that's the risk and the fear is the pace of change and adoption and rolling this out. Other examples using agentic AI, 24/7 pre-screening is now available of candidates. So we have the ability to screen candidates, and we're showing the quality of the experience from the candidate, and the information we're getting back is improved. And oh, by the way, all of that is happening not during office hours. So things that we couldn't accomplish before. So when our workers are touching this and working with these tools, the adoption is there. We can measure that. We're tracking it. The capability building, so we can move from kind of like that was mentioned, we use AI to we're actually integrating AI into how we work. That's the trickier part. And a big part of that is the capability building. And I don't know that anyone has the secret sauce there. What I can say is we're being very proactive in trying to help support upskilling of our own colleagues, so in turn we can help our customers do the same. We've got partnerships with Microsoft and Salesforce where we've unveiled not only custom AI training, so role training that we've just launched this year, but also we have a bank of over 800 hours of pull-down content that workers can use to go and educate themselves. And I think supporting in that colleagues and employees in that journey of upskilling and capability building is really key to getting success out of these tools and driving the adoption.
Oh, that's great. That's perfect. Roman, you've got an interesting background, just because I know you, of business and IT. And when you think about some of the factors you're using to help organizations move forward and really adopt this, what are some of the things where they're getting stuck, and how are you helping them overcome those?
I think I called it spin.
Yes, you did.
And it's true, because there, you know, as a new technology comes on the marketplace, like AI did when it launched, people tend to, there's a group of individuals that'll always gravitate to it, run with it, understand it on their own, sort of self-service. Yeah. There's a group of individuals who will never buy into it because of the fear. And there's a group of individuals that sort of sit in the middle, and they look for a little bit of guidance, they look for a little bit of a push, but they tend to then get into a spin. Yeah. And the spin usually comes with trying to understand where the value is and where to apply it adequately to see some form of return back into either their day-to-day work life or back to the organization as a savings. They just get stuck in there, and they're just turning it and trying something new and continue to try it. You know, as when I got into WSIB, they're on a journey already. I say that because there was 2 or 3 of them in the room. They're on a journey already down the AI space, but I think they're also in a little bit of a spin in some areas. In that case, it's more around we organized the approach differently. So basically, we went out to we went to all the different business units and clusters in WSIB. We started at the senior levels, VP, director, down to almost manager. And we brought a third party in to sit with us and explain and talk about what it is, how to approach it, what are the ways you can get benefit out of it, just to educate people. Because I said, you know, the first pocket, they don't need it. They're off and running. Yeah. The second pocket, they're stuck in the mud. And the third pocket is just sort of sitting on ice, yeah, running with no rubber shoes on. Exactly. And we came out with, I think the list was over, as we worked through the different possibilities, we came out with a list of over 1,000 opportunities with AI. Wow. And the organization narrowed that down to 19 priorities. Think about that, 1,000 ideas to 19 priorities.
They probably used AI to consolidate the list.
So I'm just saying, it's, you know, you're going to have all kinds of people.
Yeah. It's
a matter of spending the time to address each pocket, maybe a little bit differently, and bring them up to speed where everybody else is.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. Thank you. Margot, we had talked a little bit about building on best practices in terms of implementing AI successfully. What would you encourage people in the room to do based on some of the success you've had?
Sure. I think a couple of these concepts have already been touched on by my fellow panelists. The first, I think, is it's really important to provide clear guardrails. I think sometimes some of that hesitation comes from people being concerned about missteps or using it inappropriately. And so by putting those guardrails out, it gives people the confidence to understand where it should be used, where it can't be used, how data is being protected, and some of those things. We've talked a lot about training and experimentation. I think providing those opportunities for that safe space to learn, to test things out. We run programs from AI learning days that are available to the entire firm to a very comprehensive and intensive AI training program where we are building deep AI champions with deep expertise throughout the organization. But we recognize, to your point, not everybody is going to get to that level. So providing different amounts of training. I can tell you from an HR perspective, we recognize that we need to lead by example. And we ran a training boot camp specific to the HR function. And going into that training, I was hearing a lot of feedback from my leaders that there was a mix of both excitement as well as quite a bit of trepidation. And it was great to see coming out of that training, people's confidence rose exponentially. Over 90% of the team saw opportunities to incorporate AI in their daily work. And 3 months later, over 90% of the team was continuing to use AI on a daily basis. So, by investing that time, giving them that hackathon opportunity to put those new skills in practice and experiment in a safe space, it really helped the adoption curve. I would also encourage you to think about, what does success look like, and think about how you're going to measure that, because there's a bunch of different ways to come at that, whether it's looking at productivity gains, whether it's looking at quality gains in terms of reduction in errors, whether you're looking for, usage metrics, but also think about things like employee engagement and confidence levels, customer service and how that's being impacted, and having a clear roadmap for what you're trying to achieve. And then finally, it's been touched on already, I think it's so important for leaders to role model. We have to show that curiosity, that vulnerability in terms of, being upfront that we're not all expert coders, but we're willing to try. I will often talk to my team about the ways in which I'm using AI as a thought partner to just get them thinking about different use cases. I will also share when I've tried something that didn't quite work out. Sometimes it necessitates numerous prompts before you get to the end result that you're ideally trying to achieve. And by sharing some of those examples, it shows that we're not perfect, but we're bringing that curiosity and that mindset because, as you said, it's not going away. We can't put our head in the sand. It's imperative that we start building our own capabilities with it as well, because our teams do look up to us.
Yeah, I think that's such a good example. As I was listening to you, it reminded me of one day I was playing around with it, and I was probably being a little persistent on this, but it wasn't exactly doing what I wanted it to do. And finally, I figured out the right prompt, the right wording, and like presto, it came up. I was so excited. I ran down the hall to one of my colleagues, and I said, I did it. I know how we can do this. Anyways, I felt like a child again, but it was so great. Roman, maybe back to you a little bit for a moment, just on when you think about key success factors about, implementing AI, from a CIO perspective, how do you think about that, and how you think about talking about ROI in the still relatively early days?
I have to be a little careful here, but I look at it different ways, actually. ROI can mean different things. In specific areas of the organization, ROI could be a pure financial number and a return you're looking for. Right? Automate a process, take time out of a process, and return money back. ROI could also be the value of the individuals feeling successful in what they just accomplished, which doesn't have a financial aspect to it today, but potentially will have one in the future.
Yeah.
So when I look at it, ROI two ways. Is there a human factor win, and is there a financial factor win? And then how do you differentiate the two to drive it forward?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. It's so easy to miss that, but if you think about it from a behavior change point of view, the human part of it's obviously the more important one. The financial piece will be over next quarter, and then you'll move on. Sorry, Brice, I know you're a financial expert, but regardless, it's such an interesting aspect of it. So, Brice, I understand you started a new company, Zero Stone, in the space of AI advisory. It'd be really interesting to hear, and I appreciate it's still super young, but a couple of examples where you've had some really compelling success with that.
Look out for the guy bringing out his reading glasses.
Yes.
I promise I'll try to keep it exciting. Thank you, Tim. 2 weeks ago, I was down in San Diego speaking at a conference by a group called Enertech that is a corporate VC that has industrial limited partners. Caterpillar, Cummins, Linamar, Martin Rea, those types of companies. And they want to interface into the tech world and make sure they're not falling behind. They invited me to sit in a closed-door session with only the industrials, not the tech companies themselves. And the guy who was moderating a full room discussion required every one of those large industrials to articulate tangible use cases for what they're doing with AI. And I wasn't clear. I don't live in the industrial world. I'm a tech guy. And when I got in there and listened to what these people were saying, I'm like, they are full on. Caterpillar, first of all, they think very globally, and they see competition across the world. Thousands of use cases at any point in time being experimented with and then being rolled into production. Some of you will have heard of the Koch brothers company. They move Alberta oil and refine it, the heavy oil. They use the term unprompted digital twin to make the monthly decision as to exactly what they're going to do to the bitumen and how they're going to move it down, and then they use AI to make some decision making on it. Every group down there was full on. And again, it reaffirms that the experimentation, the need to be deep in this. So I'm going to start with a quick few learnings we've had from Zero Stone, our consultancy, around the mid-market, and then I'm going to move to a few use cases just to dabble a little bit. And I'll end with a couple HR ones to keep the crowd hopefully on edge. Okay, so what we see, and again, remember, mid-market. So the reason we started this thing is that we are pretty close to a couple of the hyperscalers, the Googles, Microsofts. And when they're delivering cloud and AI services, what they said to us is they said, for the enterprise, the large companies, what ends up happening is the CEO gets asked by his board, or even other places, because they're obviously smart and literate, what's going on with AI? What's your AI strategy? And they go and they hire someone who has a very sexy name that does strategic consulting, and they pay $1 million for a PowerPoint, and then they go to the board and they say, here's some thinking on AI, and then they say it's $10 million to do our first project with this group. The mid-market cannot do that, okay? They can't afford it, and they don't think that way. So we started this as a very practical approach to a target companies up to $1 billion in revenue that just don't play that kind of enterprise game. And the top 3 things that we saw in being successful with starting a process and whether we would take on a client and whether they'd want to take on us is number 1, my guys call it identity. CEO must be the strategic leader, CEO. There is no abdicating that responsibility. And guess who sits right beside them to deliver that in terms of the organization? HR. Number 2 is proof of value. So we want to find things after doing some value mapping and some very short blitzy stuff after educating management teams on what agentic AI is in terms of where to start. And there's very logical methodologies that can do that in a very efficient way that are not a huge PowerPoint. Okay, and then third, and this also comes back to the people in this room, is culture. And it's generally learning and growth and dealing with the fear and the uncertainty. It's very clear if you're a person who's doing a double key entry job, if you're a person whose job is to transcribe, those are going away. I'm sorry, that's reality. And so it's how do you get your organization to embrace the change skilling and give them opportunities, okay? And that is our role in this room, okay? So take that as some thinking at a macro level. I'll do 2 tech style, 2 more traditional business, and then 2 HR. So we invest in tech. It's very interesting to watch tech companies that have basically grown up in AI. We have a company that sells the brain software to a certain type of construction company. They've built this company in an AI world. You guys all know about customer acquisition and retention. right? On the retention side, the founder said, I never want to have churn. And generally speaking, retention is pretty poorly managed. Customer satisfaction, have they stopped using the product, da 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 da. He built an agentic solution that every day takes all of the inputs of history, entire history, including the yesterday, all customer interactions, all tickets, usage patterns, so on, consolidates that into a customer by customer report and gives recommended actions and churn risk. They have had 0 churn since implementing this. So he'll wake up in the morning, he'll have a report, top 3 red customers, and it'll say, you should call the owners today. Okay, it's to that level of prescription. It gets better every single day. Now, I think everyone in this room has heard about customer support and agentic, and even just straight up old school machine learning chatbot. We have an investment in a software company that provides the nerve center for gyms, studios, boot camps, and so on. They are diverting 75% of customer support inbounds with no human interaction, and first call resolution is done by the machine. Okay? That is one area that I can guarantee you will look at if you haven't already. Okay, so there's 2 tech companies. Now, what we're seeing in traditional, we have a logistics client, third-party logistics, that allows consumer brands and e-commerce to outsource to. And it started with these guys, but it keeps coming up. Sales solution engineering. You go to a new customer and you've got a bit of a complicated business and you have to do a pretty complicated costing exercise to know what to charge them. I actually didn't realize how cumbersome this was in some of these companies because I didn't grow up in this world. We have multiple clients that one that's very bespoke will take 3 months to do a quote. That's how bespoke this business is. We have some that'll take a month. And they're looking at this and they're like, this is actually insane. CEOs are pressing very hard on turning this much faster. And so we have implemented an agentic solution on one that automates quoting for what I'll call easy classified quotes. And there's a small human in the loop on the more complicated ones, 30 days down to 5 business days. Just to give you some concept of what Roman was talking about on ROI. The way these guys, the consultants, frame it is very workflow, inquiry to resolution, order to cash, these kinds of things. We have another logistics company that is focused on, again, any customer inbound. What happens now is it goes to a human. There's a classification process. There's a research involvement. It's run down to resolution, back and forth, technical, this, that, and the other thing. Straight up agentic solution. The goal was to divert, never touch a human for greater than 50% of those inquiries. They're past that now, and they're just learning and getting it better every single time. Customers love that turnaround, right? It would go into a black box for 2 weeks, depending on the complexity. All of that is gone. Okay, and then 2 HR use cases, and I think they've almost been touched upon. One is top of funnel applicant, job description creation, obvious, I think. Literally obvious for consistency of compensation, for how that fits in the organization, and so on. Kind of a no-brainer agentic style solution there. And then the actual management of the posting process, working with the hiring manager, and really reducing friction on the speed to get that out once it's approved. So top of funnel. And then the other one that they gave me, I don't know anything, I just ask people for things, was, and actually to give you an idea on ROI, time to post reduced from 5 to 7 days to 1 to 2 days, job description editing and rework cut by 60 to 70% for recruiters, and then consistency on leveling and compensation. So you're not messing around with that after the fact and kind of annoying candidates and so on. And there's real financial impact to those numbers. Okay, and then use case 2 was the screening and selection process. I know what's happening now, particularly for certain types of jobs. You guys put this out, we're in a tricky economy right now. You get 1,000 applicants for a job. what the hell do you do to manage that? Doing that laboriously with humans is actually impractical. So without belaboring it, there are obvious solutions that can be built using agentic and related to add intelligence throughout that process and injecting the human into it at the smartest, highest value add times. The ROIs that are coming out on this and the amount of time saved by doing this, I think are some of the most interesting in HR as a function. I'll stop there.
Amazing. Thank you. That's great. Boy, there's a whole bunch of questions that could come out of that, and they probably will in about 10 minutes, so hold that thought. But I want to, Diane, I want to talk to you about the notion that, as we've all now spoken about, organizations don't succeed because of AI alone. It's the AI and human mix. Can you just comment on that a little bit in terms of your experiences?
Of course. And I would say all of us as leaders and also as organizations, we have to change the paradigm. And rather than thinking of AI as replacement, you have to start thinking of AI as a partnership. Truly, we have to start working together, right? And ultimately, I would say we have to also protect what is human. I loved what you said at the beginning, Tim, right? Let's think about the empathy. A bot cannot be empathetic the way we are. Let's think about building relationship with humans, not with bots, to go back to your example, right? Let's think about relationship building, but also maintaining that relationship. Let's think about the innovation, the enhancements, the feelings. Nobody's going to be taking that away, but we have to make sure we are protecting it, but we also communicate about that. Yes, you are doing this role, you're still a human, just working with AI. The second one I would just think is also celebrate the wins. Once they are going to be starting, using it. And to your point, I love what you said, Margot, about experimentation. The only way you are going to be trying, even if it is failing afterwards and trying again and communicating that, by you experimenting it, you're going to be getting better and better and better, like everything else. But make sure you do celebrate those wins with the people, because they are going to be looking upon that and just, seeing how it is. And also, I would say to your point, also how can we keep the human and also have the AI replace the smaller admin task, but communicate, to your point, because all those positions are going to be, of course, eliminated, and they will know that. But again, communicate with the people. And all those small admin that take a lot of work, to your point about the surveys, think about all the job descriptions. You gave all these examples, screening, all this. I think within HR, we have multiple, attitudes, including drafting a policy. However, be careful about communicating with the people to keep the privacy. I'm sure Roman will enjoy this, making sure, of course, the proprietary information is not being escalated, so we don't say write an email to X and you put the name, because that's not okay, and guide them towards successes. And that's important. I think last but not least, I'll leave you with this. I was thinking, let me find some good acronyms about AI rather than artificial intelligence. I would say all of us, our role is truly to adapt and ignite. Speak about AI. So adapt to current times. AI is here. We have to start using it and ignite your teams, ignite your people, speak to them about it, get excited, be excited about it yourself. It's truly working if you use it right. It's truly working if you offer the people the tool. It's really working if you offer the education for them and get the feedback from them. What's working, what's not working, how can we learn together? Because ultimately, as intelligent the board is, ultimately to your point, they are looking to us to give them the answers as well. So we have to truly work together, experiment together, and of course, celebrate the wins together.
That's great guidance on the acronym. I love that. That's really good. Okay, we're going to do a quick question each, starting with Britta. Just quick comment on how you see AI strengthening human potential rather than replacing, so to speak.
I think Diana just talked a lot of it. To me, the
Yes.
short answer to that is making sure we keep AI human-centric. The more we can show how we remove friction for people use it in their daily lives, the more we'll see adoption and the more we'll see confidence building. And with confidence comes the integration. Would be my short answer.
Perfect, thank you. Roman?
I think we need just to keep investing in the creativity side of it and open it up as much as possible for people to play and understand,
Yes.
yet keep the guardrails in place to ensure you're ensuring privacy and adhering to all the laws that exist there. Because those that run with it tend to forget there's this other side. It's always somebody will take care of it. we have to look at both sides.
Yeah.
But we have to keep it open so the creativity continues to flow.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I love that. That's great. Margot.
I agree with everything my fellow panelists have said so far. We often talk about the idea of a human in the loop every time AI is being used. So again, it's about augmenting, it's about partnering with, it is not about replacement. I think there's no denying that many jobs as we know them today will be disrupted, but disruption and displacement don't mean the same thing. And so really honing in on that, partnership, treating it like a colleague in terms of enhancing your own output and productivity. And hopefully that helps to take away some of the initial fear and resistance. But I totally agree on these creating safe spaces, to experiment, to try hands-on, to fail fast and learn from that with those appropriate guardrails in place.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Brice.
You know what? I'll go in a different direction just to be a little controversial, okay? Just because of the where I sit and what I see. So if you look at the AI narrative across, let's call it thought leaders in tech and that world, it's really interesting. There's a group called the P-Doomers, which you can guess what they mean, probability of existential risk. Geoffrey Hinton, we'll pick a great Canadian recent Nobel Prize winner, the inventor of various aspects of AI, claims that there's a 10 to 20% existential risk to humans of AI. There are a number of people in a camp of even higher risk. And then on the other side of the narrative, you have an abundance crowd. Okay, this is going to basically take the tedium out of humanity, create an incredible flourishing, deflate cost to incredible levels, and we're going to live in a world of abundance. Okay? Now, who the hell knows, right? I'm kind of hoping the 10 to 20% doesn't happen, but I don't really like that probability if I can say it that way. So my question often, or my thought, what happens with the abundance narrative is that they all admit there's a transition, that they don't understand what's going to happen. And a lot of people try this thing you may have heard, where they're like, well, what's going to happen? And they all revert back to the story of agricultural to urbanization. At some point, 100 and some odd years ago, 97% of people worked on farms, and now that number is almost zero. And they use that as a narrative. The issue that you have is that others will say, yeah, but that actually happened at a measured pace, which allowed us to adapt and move and not destroy ourselves. So again, not being super negative here, but the jobs of this crowd are so important in this transition, okay? Because we can clearly see a whole bunch of change, and we can't see what might be far more profound change. So the advice, again, comes back to staying on the curve, ideally out the curve, and pushing that through your organization, being relentless, pushing startup principles and innovation continuously, and embracing the transition in a smart and sensible way to ultimately do our jobs, which is drive shareholder return.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you. And Diana.
That's awesome. I would say just continue the learning, create those innovation labs. You can do them, what we are doing in our organization, we do them by department, and we truly encourage the leaders to have this type of sessions with their people, whereby they bring the creative thinking together. And whenever they have a problem, the question would be, have you tried with AI? Did you put it in Copilot? Did you put it in ChatGPT? What is AI saying? And then brainstorm together. This way, the AI is being partnered with the human. The people feel they have a voice, and then ultimately, the ultimate result is like, oh, wow, I didn't even know. And I think they get to start adopting AI in a much better and meaningful way because they see, oh, wow, I didn't think about that. So again, it comes back to the partnership and creating by all these experimentation sessions, to your point, you want to make sure you don't feel obsolete. And hopefully we'll have a role in the future and, by adopting AI and making sure you're all being successful and continue to learn and share. Because ultimately we don't have the best answer all the time, but just like about learning and sharing and adopting it, we can be successful together.
Great. Thank you, Diana. Thank you. Okay, here's the opportunity. You've got these 5 for another 20, 30 minutes. This is the chance to ask them some questions. So who has a question for them? Perfect.
Look forward to seeing you on the ski slope soon.
Yes, sir.
I have a question for Brice. You talked about that example of using agentic AI to reduce customer churn. I'm in the education business. I own Trials College. I've got 90,000 graduates, been around for decades. In the post-secondary world as a whole, there's a massive number of people who start a program and never finish. How can agentic AI work to reduce the termination rate, to increase the retention rate in post-secondary education? It would be an opportunity worth billions upon billions across the world.
So I don't think I can actually answer the how, but I can answer that I think there's a massive opportunity there. And if I was to use the principles of the example that I used, the first thing that they did is they digitized everything humanly possible to then analyze and to run the various, as I said, the agentics on a nightly and then back basis to then create outputs that allow interventions to be done in a very proactive, preemptive way that would have been a dream 1 year ago, okay? So I would envision similar opportunities, okay? Let's say you recorded every counselor interaction with a student, transcribed it, maybe anonymized it for privacy. You fed that into a database. You cross-correlated that to some type of departure data, and you started to look at patterns, okay? And then you bring that in to start preemptively analyzing some student behaviors with whatever data that you can use, admissions data, ongoing data, marks, whatever data you have and whatever data you need created, and then turn that into this new paradigm for how you interact with students with the goal of being super proactive, catching the risks early, adding the right supports as quickly and efficiently as possible, even knowing to add them, and then how that would work its way through the system. Again, I'm kind of talking, you see where I'm going there? But what I have found in this world is the starting point is always data, okay? And when you start with data and you think about what you have, what you don't have, and what you could have, it creates these, like this company I'm mentioning to you, probably for the first little while did not record every customer interaction. Now they do. And you start going through this, you organize your data, you start figuring out how to center what you're looking for, what is the smartest set of metrics and so on, and then you start to create that repository and then you start to build solutions to learn from it. I think this is a super interesting opportunity. When I think about companies that are involved in the tech side of education, I'll pick Applied Board as an example. I've got to think a lot of them are, or at least some tech is thinking about this as it rolls through the kind of the life cycle of a student.
Right. Thank you. Good. Can you, Kim, right here, halfway up.
Hey, Tim. Chad Ross, I'm the CHRO at Sherritt.
Yes.
This might be for Brice, what you see through Zero Stone, or for any other of the panelists who have it set up internally, but from an org structure perspective, I get that the CEO should lead things, but ownership of AI advancement, are you seeing it become more like a support function, legal, HR, finance, IT? Or are you still seeing it sitting in IT or decentralized, and maybe from a mid-size organization perspective?
I can chime in initially, because what we're seeing is fascinating partnership develop between the CIO and the CHRO. So these departments used to, really interact independently, and HR wasn't necessarily seen as being very involved in the CIO space. And now we actually have, in our company, in our organization, we have our CHRO and CIO as seeing as the primary partners to drive adoption and change. And the dynamic that's coming out of how IT and HR are for the first time blending to reshape how we work together, I think is really inspiring. So that's the evolution we're seeing in our organization of the partnership and accountability far beyond the CEO, extending out, yes, through the entire executive committee, but HR taking a leadership role with the IT department.
I would, it's interesting because we sort of seeing the same thing, but not on the HR side. We're seeing it more on any business unit side. Our analytics department sort of morphed out of our AI department or AI teams morphed out of our analytics areas, but then moved and shifted into the ownership of a business unit. And then we moved it and shifted it back just recently in the last couple of months, back under IT. But it's only successful because there is a very strong, open relationship between the business looking at opportunities to drive and IT looking at opportunities to automate. And no one should have an overarching win. It needs to be a united front to move everything forward.
Yeah, exactly. Other thoughts?
I would say when we started on this journey, probably like many organizations, the initial focus was this is a tech play. And so we have an internal function called innovation and change, which our IT function sits under that umbrella. And so it was very much, sort of initially viewed in that space. And we quickly realized this is not about tech, this is really about enabling behavior change. And so this is now being viewed as a collective responsibility across the firm. And we have a governance committee that has representation, myself, obviously IT, risk, legal, and members of our business units as well, because we realize it's a collective responsibility. So certainly HR is playing a much more collaborative role in helping to drive that cultural and transformation shift as we move forward.
Thanks. Brice.
At the risk of I don't want to repeat, so I think these are all very relevant points. I'll try to be additive. We're finding that there's an ask for a fractional chief AI that is very close to the developments in agentic and so on, that is a bit of an ongoing narrative, which I find interesting, but it's really interfacing to the organization wherever relevant. We have seen some interesting resistance from the IT department in certain instances. I think there's some fear there. I was surprised. Not really embraced, a bit of a kind of that older school IT silo-y kind of guard everything mentality that has caused CEOs to have to try to pry that thing open. And I will come back. I agree with all of what you're saying, but this is one where the relentlessness of the CEO is continuously required. You do not get a break as a CEO here to spend a week and push this through your organization. No, it requires a constant press and formalization of that press and how you work with your senior leadership team and so on around that.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think it does start with CEO, and in our case, what we did when we started launching the policies and we did a training of AI for the entire staff, it was a 3 partnership: CHRO, CIO, and the Chief Digital Officer in our case, because ultimate digitalization is also key for AI. But to your point, we went back, the CEO and the entire executive team, and we thought, okay, how can we best present this to make sure that, yes, we have the governance from the HR perspective, yes, we have all the security from the IT perspective, but we also know about digital risk from the digitalization perspective. So my recommendation would be speak with your executive team and make sure, yes, while it is the CEO responsibility and the executive team to launch it, AI has to be part of the culture. Yeah. If it's not embedded and people are starting speaking about it and using it within the organization, they wouldn't know. We cannot just sit at certain C-level. So be intentional about it. My recommendation would be, that's what we do. We speak in the town halls, and whenever we launch something and we launch anything with AI, we do communicate. This has been done, and we are intentional about coming back to the executive team and say, this is what we think, because sometimes the CFO might see it differently. Well, what about this, right? Things we haven't seen. But you're absolutely right. It starts with the CEO, cascades down, of course, to our resource in human resources, digitalization, IT, but it has to be a continuous communication, partnership, and collaboration.
Yeah. Hey, Tim, can I say one other thing? The other thing that I find interesting about this is how are corporates responding to staying close to the innovation that's actually happening? And what I'm seeing, so Andreessen Horowitz, one of the most famous VCs in the world, out of the Valley, have said that they are investing in any startup that will disrupt incumbency in any traditional industry that has not been disrupted because of regulatory capture or other friction. The big three are housing, healthcare, and education. Education, interestingly, which really needs some other changes beyond retention. That industry is going to look a lot different in about 10 years. So what the best practice companies are doing globally are they're thinking about how to interface to startup land in a variety of different ways to not miss and be left behind. And that typically manifests in two ways. One is very formalized partnership programs. Koch brothers, I mentioned, Cat, Comet, these types of companies. The partner programs that they have, JP Morgan, the US guys, they lead this kind of thinking. So how do you partner with startups and remember, you have something to give that you often don't realize the value of, and that is a purchase order. So you can create some very interesting symbiotic flow, design partners with AI startups, these kinds of things. And then the second, and we are very poor at this in Canada, is corporate venture capital and making investments that are strategic to allow you to learn from them and to deal with disruption risk and potentially actually capture a bit of a return on that as well. There are, I mean, probably the two best in Canada that are Canadian headquartered are Power Corp with their quite significant VC world, and TELUS, actually, interestingly, TELUS Ventures, quite well done. I think we have a long way to go in this country to really ramp up corporate venture and innovation.
I have to bring up our potential, just to build on your comment, because your comment about CEOs, I mean, I couldn't agree more that the pace has to be set there and the direction has to be set at the CEO level. I think about the CEO of the Adecco Group made a bold joint venture with Salesforce to develop, I mean, we talk about disruption in AI at tactical level roles. This one is very disruptive. This is building a digital CHRO. So working with at very senior executive levels, how can I analyze the organization that exists in the Americas today and completely disrupt it by scanning all of our company data, all of our employee feedback? So this our potential joint venture with Salesforce is an example of completely disrupting the most sensitive parts and most executive levels of our organization. And I think that's innovative thinking to get there first. And that's an example of the CEO making bold bets and doing these joint ventures.
Every one of us will be twinned by agents soon. Every one of us.
What an uplifting
Why are you staring at me like that?
No pressure. Fobo it is. Right?
Tim, we're going to twin you, my friend.
Yeah, that's the last thing the world needs. But maybe I'm gonna just slightly introduce or interrupt our questions for just a quick sec. Can you spend 60 seconds on agentic and what it really is? Because I suspect not everyone really is tracking on all of that.
Maybe Roman should do that.
Yeah.
It's probably better at explaining.
No, you go ahead, Brice.
Oh man, I'm under pressure. I don't know anything. Agentic. So we know Gen AI, right? We go do research with ChatGPT, take all interesting. Take that brain, put autonomous actions around it, put a management layer that's called orchestration above it to basically automate things. And the ultimate will be recursive learning, where it'll actually get smarter continuously, which is very close to coming.
Yeah. Perfect.
Think of it like a digital workforce.
Yeah.
Okay, if you want to go to an extreme, I was listening to a podcast on the way in, and the last 90 days, there's been very significant advancement in agent capability. And a guy, well-known VC, Jason Lemkin, was talking about how in their executive, he thinks 2026 will be the year that agents are part of your team, not augmenting your team.
Yeah.
Okay, and he said they have 3 agents, one for top of funnel, customer acquisition, one for account management, like sales, engineering, and so on, and then one for customer success. And at their executive meetings, they have a placard on 3 different chairs for each of those agents. And he's making a point as the CEO about these are our team members, interfaces to them daily for check-ins, has a human in the loop at the right points if things go off the rails, and there's a constant iteration of learning happening. Back to your 24/7 comment, right? These things are out there, and this is revenue, right? By the way, the revenue side of client opportunity with agentic is unbelievable, but that's how I'll try to explain it quickly. Is that fair?
That's perfect. I love the name tags. That's great.
Yeah. Like you do crazy things to get people to understand the change happening. Like think about you're checking in with your agent daily as an employee.
Yeah.
Like that's not a natural habit that we have. But go 10 years out and think about the robot you're clearly going to have in your house that's going to be doing a bunch of things that you didn't realize could be done. I mean, that's where we're within probably 5 years of that. It's just getting the brain into this new paradigm, and those who harness it fastest and use it in the most effective ways. I mean, look, I can go forever, you know. I'll only say one other thing for this question. Back to Andreessen and a few other VCs. These guys have been raising such large funds because every investor is worried about missing this trend that they actually had more money than they needed to invest in traditional startup land. So what they've been doing is buying traditional businesses, going across their portfolio and their ecosystems, and like adrenaline fueling them on AI. So a famous example, I can't remember the VC, they bought a hospital group in a state in the US and are basically digitally transforming the entire hospital group. They expect 10 to 20% EBITDA margin improvements from the AI injection. We'll see if the experiments work, but this is the kind of thinking that is happening right now. Incumbent disruption.
Yeah, that's substantial to say the least. All right, Kim. Sorry, Kim's got, there you are, Roland.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. Hi, Rolando Lopez from WSIB. So I think many people in this room are in a position where we are the ones either thinking up use cases or making it happen, right? So I'm just wondering though, with AI's disruptive nature, I'm wondering about the quality of the use cases that we're coming up with right now. Because we're just thinking, oh, how can AI improve my life today, right? So I'm just wondering, Roman and Brice, you talked about seeing thousands of use cases. What are your thoughts on the use cases that people are coming up with right now? Is it just kind of run-of-the-mill? Do you see very disruptive ones? And you know, when people like us are coming up with use cases, what do we need to think differently so that we can make a use case that's not just solving today's problems, but perhaps the future?
Thanks, Rolando.
Thanks, Rolando. I think you get a full mixture of use cases depending on the user area and the individuals that are answering. I don't think you want to negate any of them, and I don't think you want to ignore any of them, because all of them have some value in relation to the individuals bringing it up. The challenge I think we face is making the big and hard decisions around use cases that involved, up till now, a traditional human decision that had to be made somewhere throughout the process. And I think that's where people are struggling. Do you allow it to make the decision, or don't you allow it to make the decision? Or do you interject that there will always be some kind of human interaction at that point in time of decision making?
Yeah.
So if I may just add to that, that's an excellent way to say it. And it's okay if a human is in the loop, because the goal is to be continually reviewing advancement to see the opportunity at what point you have enough trust in the agentic framework that you can pull the human out of the loop. So I'll add that very prescriptively. In terms of use cases, so how we think about the world, and look, Roman said 1,000 use cases down to 19, so really interesting. I haven't seen that many, maybe smaller organizations, but we walked into a prospect in Ottawa last week, and we met with, they had hired a CAO who was got a lot of different consulting and other experience, relatively new hire, 61 use cases identified. And that was a precursor to the value mapping exercise that we're going to do with them that gives us a running start. So what I would say to you to think about use cases would be, number one, it's workflow driven. So you don't, it's not functional to me. It's like you need to hire someone as fast and efficiently as possible and have them stay with your organization and be the best hire at the right, that creates a set of workflows. Okay, and then within those workflows, what makes the most sense from the data that you have, the capabilities that you have, and so on. That's how we think about. We walk in with a presupposed set of workflows, we validate them, and then look, people smart executives sitting around a table pretty quickly understand where these impacts can be, and they very quickly drive to good places to be looking at. And maybe the last thing I'll say is you said that the people in this room are driving a lot of the use cases. I have not seen that. So HR, in my experience, has not been the primary driver of organizational-wide use cases. I have seen it more from other areas. I think it's excellent if you can be definitely part of that process, pushing it, organizing it, and so on.
Great. Thanks very much. Great.
Board view AI. I'm thinking a lot about the role of boards and senior leaders in navigating this incredible period of disruption and opportunity. Canada, as you know, we rank number 2 in the world in AI research talent, so the technology is here, but we're only 20 in global adoption of AI. And a number of the panelists have touched on the topic, but I'd really welcome your thoughts on what's holding us back. Because we have great success on this panel, but what are you seeing that's holding us back, and what do we need to do differently?
Oh, God. What a tee up. That's a softball right there, isn't it? So I've been living in Canadian innovation forever, okay? Jeffrey Hinton, Joshua Bengio, Rick Sutton, Nobel Prize winners, the thought leaders in these areas. We have captured effectively none of the intellectual property. Google hired Hinton, Google hired Sutton, and all that IP flowed to Google Brain and Google DeepMind. And that is a chronic issue in our country with respect to the commercialization and the capture of innovation. We could talk about that forever. Okay, my general view is that boards are basically completely useless. Their job is to decide whether or not the CEO has a job every day. And so the reality is that they're going to see some patterns around the boardroom tables of the boards they're on. They're going to bring those and try to sound smart. Good for them. The reality is we need to be driving within our organizations, not relying on the board, and pushing as executives and as staying ahead of the curve on these types of issues, in my opinion. Please don't record that one, Tim.
No, we got that. Any other thoughts on the panel? Like, comment? No?
My comment is, the reason I'm hesitant is my comment's not necessarily specific to Canada, but what holds back the advancement of innovation, and I see it here as well. I'm speaking on behalf of large corporate organizations, and that's bureaucracy. That's the hesitation. I talked a little bit about the beginning of this. We're doing this experimentation. It's isolated, but it's kind of like commercialization. How can we get it done faster? And we have to figure out how to remove those barriers internally to innovate quicker in this space. The everyday use cases that we're all talking about, I think we're all off to the races. But the fundamental disruption, I see typical red tape and bureaucracy that holds us back from, I think, scaling at a faster pace.
That's great. Janice.
I actually was going to, my colleagues behind me asked some great questions, but I also was going to actually build on that a little bit. Where does government regulation come into play here? And the other factor is how do organizations that are either partially or fully unionized, what's the perspective, pragmatic perspective for those in this room for whom this is their reality?
Who'd like to tackle that?
I'm happy to talk a little bit about regulation.
Yeah.
I'll leave the union stuff, not my expertise. I think all collective bargaining agreements should be completely reset in this country, but longer story. I'm opinionated about a lot of things. Do you realize that involuntary turnover in the federal public sector is 20 times lower than in the private sector? And we wonder why we can't get stuff done in Ottawa? It's a long discussion. But in terms of regulation, so we have a Minister of AI federally named Evan Solomon. I think a lot of you guys know the name. He is tasked with coming up with some kind of regulatory framework for AI in this country. About a month ago, they launched an AI task force. I happened to be at the launch. There were 25 odd people on it that were quite actually, in my world, quite positively skewed to tech, innovation, business, that whole world. I'll tell you, it was fascinating. So he did his launch, very growth-centric, very much, we need to get moving on this because look at what's happening in the US and China. We don't want to be Europe, some of the comments that were made, which is viewed as very regulated and slowing down and moving founders into the US. And so he had these kinds of comments. And it was really interesting to watch because he was interviewed after by the editor-in-chief of the Toronto Star. And every question was around how will we be inclusive with AI? How will we deal with privacy of AI? And that's fine, that's a Canadian way. But listening carefully to his answers and watching the reaction to this very quick task force that was assembled with a short mandate deadline has been, there's been a lot of commentary around are they moving too fast? Are they too business friendly and so on? And I worry about the counter narrative there because if you look at the US, regardless of what you think about the place, Donald Trump gets elected, he appoints a gentleman by the name of David Sachs as his AI and crypto czar. They have passed legislation and executive order one after the other that is moving crypto forward at a pace we've never seen before globally, and that puts Canada at risk in a lot of ways, and same with AI. And so my personal view is that we want to land on allowing things to move pretty quickly, allow experimentation, and allow us to be much more in a US-China-centric style than an over-regulated, over-privacy-focused European style. And I'll give one last comment. Europe, I think, is starting to recognize some of the issues that it's created for its innovation ecosystem. Everybody in this room probably knows GPDR, or whatever that acronym is, the European privacy stuff. They are starting to relax it because they are worried that it's throttling back the speed of innovation. So I land on that side, but we're about to see something in the next few months that'll be pretty interesting as to what happens in the country.
Perfect, thanks. Okay, I think we have time for one more question.
Last one.
Last official one. Just don't let them out of the room if you have a question for them.
Hi, great discussion. Thanks so much for all of your thoughts. The CEO of my company, I work with a mining technology company, has delegated the responsibility of rolling out AI within our company to me. And one of the things I want to do is put the safe guardrails in place and create a safe sandbox. But we're a mid-sized company. We don't have the resources and IT people and technology to be able to do this. So I was wondering what your recommendations are. I'm looking at, I want to encourage that experimentation across the company. I see different parts of the company need different resources. There's so many different AI models out there. How do you create that safe sandbox and space when you don't have all of the resources at your disposal?
Do you want to take that one?
Sure. I'll come at it maybe more from the people side. I think it starts with clear communication in terms of, some of the risk factors, educating people on, data privacy and putting some of those expectations in place. I don't know what kind of IT support you have access to, and I'll defer to the technology experts on the panel, but things like being able to put up firewalls, for example, so people can't access open source tools from their company computers might be a way to safeguard people going to ChatGPT or Perplexity or whatever and uploading information you don't want out there. There's also ways to use generate. I'm having a mind freeze on what the proper term is, but when you create data that can be used for experimental purposes, so you're not leveraging real data, but you're asking AI to just create a data set for you that you can then put in people's hands to go and manipulate and work with. So there's ways around it to not necessarily be using real life data, but I think it really starts with setting some clear expectations in terms of what's acceptable, what's not, and helping to educate people on the risks. Because I don't think most of our people get up in the morning looking to, break any rules or, put the company's reputation at risk, but they may not be aware of the implications of some of the actions that they're taking when they don't have that knowledge.
I think the only thing I would add to that, Margot, is we adopt the same concepts, and one thing we did is wrap it into some values around AI. And so this is no cost. And it's a way of normalizing AI usage while still putting those guardrails around. So some of our values, examples of our AI philosophy is transparency, ethics, lawfulness, but we also encourage experimentation, and that's making tools available and encouraging that curiosity. And just by setting an AI philosophy, which would cost you nothing, you can encourage people, because you're not going to be able to do this yourself at all. So you need to encourage people to come up with innovative ideas and how they can build their own skills and how you can use it within your organization. I don't know the specifics, but sometimes you just make it safe by declaring that we have an AI philosophy and an AI policy, and then you encourage organic usage that you can put guardrails around it. So we just found that was a way to normalize it and ingrain it in the everyday, is just creating some values on what our philosophical approach to AI adoption is going to be.
And if I may add maybe one piece of advice, speak with IT yourself, ultimately brainstorm together. And then what I would do if I would be you, just like have a meeting with the leaders within the organizations, because if they'll be the stewards of change together with you and brainstorm together what's working best for the organizations, then they would already embrace the change, because there was already, of course, a part of them that were part when the change happened. And I think this way, if you really think about how the organization is structured, I will look at your code of ethics. I will start drafting a proper AI policy so people have the right guidelines, to your point, what to do and not to do, and then truly speak with the leaders and make them the stewards of change together with you. So whenever they speak about all this free, if you will, so at no cost for you, experimental sessions, they will already know it and they will be embraced, and they will be, those pioneers that can engage the people in usage.
The only last thing I'll say, and this is not a sales pitch, but putting that all on your shoulders with what's happening in that business and the speed of change and all the things we've talked about today, I would consider external budget to add some brainpower to your responsibilities. I think that's rational, and I think it is sensible from a business standpoint given what's happening. So that would be my only other comment.
Great, thank you. Listen, I want to take a moment and just say thank you to each and every one of you that have come to join us this morning. It's been a super interesting conversation, and particularly to Britta, Roman, Margot, Brice, and Diana. Maybe a quick hand for them. Thank you.
Thank you.